Covalent Bonding for Mr. Świstak's AP Chemistry by yours truly, Wiktor Eźlakowski. First, let's define some terms. Covalent bond is a bond between two nonmetals, as opposed to an ionic bond, which is a bond between a metal and a nonmetal. A molecule is a compound that is formed by sharing electrons. Therefore, ionic compounds are not molecules. Organic compounds, class of molecules that contains carbon. 1. Circle any of the following compounds that would properly be called a molecule. So H2O has two nonmetals, it is a molecule. CO2, two nonmetals, it is a molecule. NaCl, it is an ionic bond because it has a metal and nonmetal, doesn't get circled. Mg3P2 is the same thing, ionic bond, it has both a nonmetal and a metal, so it doesn't get circled. And N2O5 gets circled because it is a molecule, it is a bond between two nonmetals. Naming covalent bonds. N2O4 would be called dinitrogen tetraoxide because it has two nitrogens and four oxides. SF6 would be called sulfur hexafluoride because it has one sulfur and six fluorides. Cl5 would be called xenon pentachloride because it has one xenon and five chlorides. SO3, sulfur trioxide, because it has one sulfur and three oxides. And lastly, CO would be called carbon monoxide. It has one carbon and one oxide. Now, here is a very important thing. Mono is only used for the second part of the formula. So, for example, in CO, you have monoxide. It is never used in the first part of the formula, therefore you don't have monocarbon. So you would always have a name that if it has a subscript of 1, it will only show up in the second part of the name. Therefore, CO is not called monocarbon monoxide. It is not called monocarbon oxide. It is not called carbon oxide. It is called carbon monoxide. 2. Fill in the table to indicate which prefix is used to represent the numbers. From Latin, we know that 1 is mono, 2 di, 3 tri, 4 tetra, 5 penta, and 6 hexa. 3. Name each of the following molecules. N2O5 would be called dinitrogen pentoxide, 2 nitrogens, 5 oxides. CF4 would be called carbon tetrafluoride, 1 carbon, 4 fluorides. SCl3, sulfur trichloride, 1 sulfur, 3 chlorides. SO would be called sulfur monoxide, 1 sulfur, 1 oxide. Which of the above compounds would be classified as organic? It would be carbon tetrafluoride because it contains carbon. Some more terminology. Molecular formula tells us exactly how many atoms of each element are in the compound. Empirical formula, on the other hand, tells the lowest ratio of atoms of each element in the compound. What is an empirical formula? We just defined it. It is a way to show the lowest simplified ratio of elements in a compound. How can molecules 1 and 2 have the same empirical formula even though they are different molecules? So if you look at the data table, you know that you see molecule 1 and 2, both have empirical formula of CH2, but their molecular formula are different. For molecule 1, it is C2H4. For molecule 2, it is C4H8. So to answer the question, both have a 1:2 ratio of carbon to hydrogen, and an empirical formula gives only the ratio. Therefore, both have the same empirical formula, but different molecular formulas. Given the empirical formula for a compound, is it possible to determine the molecular formula? No. The empirical formula doesn't tell us how many atoms of each element there are. 8. Given the molecular formula, though, for a compound, is it possible to determine its empirical formula? Here, the answer is yes. The subscripts have to be divided by the greatest common factor in order to do so.